Starting over doesn't feel brave. It feels heavy, like a weight you carry in silence. No applause, no encouragement, no certainty that anyone will say, "You're allowed to do this." After 30, fear changes. It's no longer the fear of failure. It's the fear of wasted meaning. The fear that if you turn the wrong way now, there won't be time to fix it later. No one warns you about this. In school, they tell you, try again. In your 20s, you have time. But after 30, there's a different whisper in the air. You've already invested too much to walk away. And it's not the voice of enemies. It's the voice of responsibility, the voice of experience, the voice of reason. That's why it sounds so convincing. You're not afraid of starting from zero. You're afraid that zero will erase everything that came before it. The years, the effort, the choices, the sleepless nights, the compromises. You're afraid to admit that something you gave your life to might have never truly been yours. And that is not weakness. That is human. After 30, you don't just change a job. You don't just change relationships. You don't just change direction. You change the version of yourself you've already shown to the world. You're no longer an experiment. You're a story. And that's why it's so hard to say, I want something different. What if I betray my past self? What if all these years were a mistake? What if people think I couldn't handle it? We live in a world where stability looks like success, where consistency is valued more than honesty, where sticking it out is praised, even when you're holding on to something that's slowly killing you. Some people stay not because they're happy, but because leaving feels irresponsible. And this is where the real trap appears. After 30, you start counting investments, not dreams. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, how much have I already put into this? Time invested, effort invested, identity invested. You're no longer just a person. You're a profession, a status, a role, someone people recognize. And to leave, you don't just change paths. You have to destroy the image of yourself you spent years building. That's why so many people aren't living their lives. They're living the life they chose once, when they didn't know any better. Once you chose from hope. Now you choose from fear. Once a mistake was a lesson. Now it feels like a sentence. But let's be honest, you're not afraid of change. You're afraid of uncertainty without permission. Before, the world allowed you to explore. Now it stays silent. No one says, you can try again. And then the inner judge appears. You should have figured it out by now. You don't have the right to start over. You're too late. And that is a lie millions of adults repeat every day. Because life is not a contract signed at 20, and not a debt you're required to repay. But until you feel that truth, you'll stay where it's safe and empty. You wake up, you do what's expected, you play the role, you earn approval. But somewhere deep inside, there's a question you never say out loud. What if this isn't all there is? Maybe the fear isn't that you'll start over. Maybe the fear is that you never will. There's a moment no one talks about. The moment when you realize that staying also has a cost. Not dramatic, not loud, but quiet and permanent. We talk endlessly about the risk of change, but we almost never talk about the risk of not changing, about the years that pass unnoticed, about the energy that slowly disappears, about the quiet resentment that builds when you keep living a life that no longer feels like yours. After 30, the fear isn't that you'll fail. The fear is that you'll succeed at something you don't even want anymore. Because here's the truth no one teaches you. You don't owe your past your future. Time spent is not a prison sentence. Effort invested is not a life contract. And loyalty to who you were should never become betrayal of who you're becoming. Starting over after 30 doesn't mean erasing your life. It means reclaiming it. You're not starting from nothing. You're starting from experience, from clarity, from scars that taught you what doesn't work. You're not late. You're informed. The idea that you're behind comes from comparing your life to timelines that were never meant for you. Someone else's pace, someone else's priorities, someone else's definition of success. But life is not a race, and there is no universal schedule that says by 30 you must have it all figured out. That idea was created to make uncertainty feel like failure. Uncertainty isn't failure. It's honesty. There are people who stayed and paid with their health, with their curiosity, with their sense of self. They did everything right and still felt empty. Because doing what's expected is not the same as doing what's aligned. Starting over doesn't mean burning everything down. Sometimes it means adjusting the direction by a few degrees. But those degrees change the entire destination. The problem isn't that change is scary. The problem is that we demand certainty before we allow ourselves to move. But certainty comes after movement, not before. No one who ever changed their life felt ready first. They felt honest first. And honesty is uncomfortable because it forces you to admit that something isn't working anymore. Not because you failed, but because you grew. You're not obligated to remain loyal to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Growth doesn't ask for permission, but fear does. Fear asks, what will people think? What if I regret it? What if I lose everything? But here's the question fear avoids. What if you don't change and regret that instead? Because regret doesn't always come from what we tried. Most often, it comes from what we never allowed ourselves to begin. Starting over after 30 is not an act of recklessness. It's an act of responsibility. Responsibility to your time, to your energy, to the one life you actually get. You don't need a dramatic collapse to justify a new beginning. You don't need permission from society, from your family, from your past decisions. The only permission required is your own. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow dreams that once kept you alive, but no longer move you forward. You are allowed to redefine success as something that feels sustainable, not just impressive. And maybe starting over doesn't mean starting from zero at all. Maybe it means starting from truth. Truth about what drains you. Truth about what excites you. Truth about what you've been tolerating instead of choosing. Because the opposite of fear is not courage. It's clarity. And clarity comes when you finally stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What can I no longer ignore?" You don't need guarantees. You need alignment. You don't need to know every step. You just need to stop standing still out of guilt. Your life is not overdue. It's waiting. So let me ask you this. If starting over felt safer, if you trusted that your past was preparation, not a mistake, what would you change?